Hi everybody, and welcome to today's virtual art tutorial. As always, lovely to be here and bring you one of these again. For those of you who are new, my name's Emma Morrissey. I'm a fine artist and art tutor amongst many other lovely creative things, and I do several of these in various different mediums and subjects for creative wellness journey. So for today, I wanted to show you a really simple way of getting to grips with oil pastels. Now this is a typical set that you'll come across, and I'll also make sure that you have the link to the image we're going to work from today, which is nice and simple of strawberries. The reason I've chosen this is that it's mainly two colours, so obviously red and green. So I'll show you how you can start to build up the composition of this. I'll make sure you have the link to this image so that you can follow along with me. As always, I like working on mixed media paper. It's really good for pretty much any medium except oil paint, but it does work for watercolour, poster paints, acrylic, pencil, pastel, ink, pretty much everything. Okay, so it doesn't matter what oil pastels you have, as this is just sort of getting to grips with them, but as they can be a little bit on the trickier side to use, I think a lot of people sometimes favour soft pastels, which are chalky in texture, but these are really, really good for layering, so that's what I'm going to show you today. So mainly the thing to remember with oil pastels is that obviously you have the pigment, which gives you the colour, and this will be usually in a powder form. You'll have a certain amount of oil, of course, to give it a sort of oily, creamy, or indeed waxy consistency, depending on what brand you have. Sometimes the ones that are a little bit more on the expensive side, tend to be creamier in texture. Some of the more reasonable ones might be a little bit waxier, but you can absolutely still use them even if you do have a cheaper set to work with. And then you have various different other binders which just help it stay in its form. And obviously you can get smaller sort of standard packs like this, which will give you a sort of standard array of colours, and you can get some that have got lots and lots and lots of colours. And some people like to have sets that have got more, because then you don't have to worry too much about mixing and layering. You can just go for the colour. But for purposes of today's tutorial, I thought we'd just start with this. Okay, so the first thing that I would recommend is have a look at the various different tones you can see. Now obviously we know this is red and green, but it's not just one type of red and one type of green. So if you have a look, what I always suggest with any type of reference photo, if you're using one that's been printed out or from a magazine, or if you're working from your phone like I am, is to just sort of hold it near all the different colours you have and just match up your colours. So even though we know strawberries are red, we can also see there's a little bit of orange in this. Okay, and there'll be a little bit of a lighter brown as well. So I'm just going to get all of the colours out that I need. We'll have a little bit of yellow for some of the highlighted areas. Red, we've got two types of green in this set, a darker one and a lighter one, so we're going to get that out. And sometimes actually grey is often used as a neutral colour. So what that means is sometimes you could start to fill in your basic shape with grey, because it's neither dark or sort of bright and colourful, so you can then layer on top of it. Okay, so these are the colours I've chosen. Now obviously this will be slightly different depending on what colours you have in your set, so don't worry if you don't have the colours I've chosen. What I would suggest, as I said, is just get the image in however you're looking at it, and just put it against all the different colours you have, and just try and match colours as best you can. Okay, and depending on how comfortable you feel. If you want to go straight in with pastels, that's fine. But just to help, I'm going to do a very, very basic sketch with you. So I'm using an HB pencil, and what I'm going to do is just start in the center here. So this is what's in the foreground, it's nearest to us, and then your background is slightly, if I hold this a little bit closer, hopefully my camera will focus for you. There you go. You can see the background is slightly on the blurry side because obviously it's behind it. Okay, so I'm just going to dart my gaze backwards and forwards as I'm just doing a very, very basic sketch of this. Don't worry about being too exact because you will likely make corrections as you start to add colour. And again, it doesn't matter what size you're working to either. I'm working to A5, so quite small because that's the size of the pad that I'm working on, and I'm just doing some very sketchy basic lines, so nothing too specific. I'm hoping my camera will pick up on that for you. There you go. Alright, so it's not exact, it's not specific in any way, it's very, very basic, but it just gives me an idea where some of the lines, this helps with the composition. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go in with my neutral, and I'm going to start under here because we can see this bit's a little bit shady, and I'm just going to use this just for all of the little sort of shady bits. Now, as I said, they do have a sort of waxy to creamy texture depending on what brand you're using. And the idea with oil pastel, obviously because they have oil in them, which is what gives them their sort of movement, so to speak, is you can build this up by layering. Alright, I'm going to go in with some orange now. I'm not going to worry too much about being specific because, as I said, because of the shape of these as well, because they don't have sort of the point that a pencil or a pen has got, is it's very, very normal to lose some of the definition. So I'm just working on the edges at the moment. You can see I'm going backwards and forwards, and just layering this colour in. Okay, so you just want to do that, just layer everything up a little bit. I apologise if my camera's moving slightly, it's because I'm going backwards and forwards, it's just making it move around a little bit. Hopefully it won't be too much of a distraction for you. Alright, so just keep building this up, a little bit at a time. Alright, so that's orange. And you can see it's quite a sort of thick sort of consistency. I'm going to go in with yellow now, because if you put red in straight away, it tends to take over because it is obviously a very bold, bright colour. But I want to have some depth of colour in this so that it doesn't look flat. So often if you do something in one tone of a colour, so say just this particular red, if you did all of the strawberries just this red, it would look quite flat. What gives you depth is by having various different tones within that colour spectrum. So if you've ever seen a colour wheel, I have done various different bits and pieces on that. So do have a look at Creative Wellness Journey for more on that. Is if you have a look at what's called your warm tones, it would look something like this. So obviously you've got your red, your orange and your yellow. Okay, so those are all your warm tones, tones that work well together, tones that often sort of will appear together in a composition. Alright, so now I'm going to start going in with some red. I'm going to leave some little spaces here as well, because obviously I want to allow for some of the little highlights here and there as well. So I'm just going to leave some little gaps because I'm going to sort of draw around where the seeds are of the strawberries. Alright, and I'm going to put that in with pencil. Now obviously we can't see all of this because it's cut off, so it will be sort of looking slightly unfinished, so don't worry about that. Right, let's go in with some greens now, starting with the lighter green. Doesn't matter whereabouts you start, whether you start sort of over here or over here. All right, I'm going to put this stalk in and just build it and layer it. That's the key when you're using oil pastels, is layering. I'm just going to put in some lines here because we can see sort of where your darker greens meet your lighter greens, which is where the highlight is. That's where the light is hitting it and giving you a lighter tone. So we're just going to put in some lines just to give you the idea, and then a line here just to emphasize that stalk. And then I'm going to just fill in this bit with a bit of a yellow. Even though it's not yellow in the background, I'm going to go over it and just put that little bit of shading around it just to bring the shape back. Okay. So we can see this bit under here is sort of a very, very light grey colour, but you can also use black for some areas, just to sort of give that idea of shade. Alright, so just want to keep layering and layering, and then I'm going to press quite light, so you'll get this sort of waxiness to it, because I'm not going to blend too much now. I want this sort of lighter tone. So again, it's all about pressure, and a lot of the virtual tutorials that I've done with you, I talk a lot about the pressure that you put on the particular medium, whether it be a pencil, a pen, and again, same with pastels, particularly oil pastels. Soft pastels are a little bit different in terms of pressure because obviously they're chalky, so they're a little bit more sensitive. I'm going to put in a very, very minimal amount of black because some artwork doesn't really involve a lot of black because it can take over, as you can see. But I'm going to put the smallest amount just here and there, just to emphasize some of the shadow areas here. Right, so I'm not going to put a lot. All right, I do a very, very small amount just around here. See, it just brings the shape back a little bit if you lose some of that definition. Okay, there we go. A little bit here. And then using my pencil, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to put in some little circles here for seeds, and then I'm going to just blend around them very carefully. So you will not probably be able to get all of the definition on there because obviously these are very, very tiny and you'd need to sharpen this. You can sharpen oil pastels, but I recommend you have a particular sharpener that you just use specifically for oil pastels. If you want to sharpen them very gently into a point, then you can use them for more detail. So sometimes if you're using oil pastels or anything like that, crayons as well, if you wanted to get a nice sort of point to work with, then if you've got a sharpener that you use just for that, because of course you don't want to then put a pencil in and get it all messy with the various different colours. Alright, so that's the basis of my colour done. And you can see it's not exact to the image, but it gives you the idea of it. So you've got all of the basic colours in place. I'm going to add a little bit of the brown that I got out earlier, which is the slightly lighter brown, just here and there, not too much. There we go, just a touch of it here and there. And then you can go back in with pencil. So if you want to go back in and just pick out some more specific sort of lines and edges, that sort of thing, then I suggest using a B pencil of some sort. I've got a 6B here, but a 4B will also work. A 2B would work. Pretty much any pencil. An HB would also work as well. Okay, so I'm just going to re-emphasize some of these lines here, just to bring back some of the detail on the stalks and little leaves here. Okay. Now obviously depending on what size surface you're working on, if you're working much larger, then of course you might want to try and fill the page and just draw in some imaginary strawberries, because of course we're limited here in the reference photo. If I hold this a little bit close, hopefully you can see. I'm just going to have a little look for some of the seeds and try and put some of these in, just the idea of them. Just little marks here and there. Okay, so again, as I said, depending on what type of oil pastel you're using, if you find they feel quite waxy like crayons, you just want to sort of layer a bit harder, put a little bit more pressure on so that you get more of a smooth surface. And if you do want a lighter tone, then of course you can just press a little bit lighter like I've done down here, so that you get just that sort of idea of something lighter. In terms of different tones of the same colour, I want to show you something really, really quickly. So I'm just going to use a orange oil pastel here. I'm just going to put 3 little squares of it here. Okay, so I want to show you something called tint, tone and shade. Now a tint, also known sometimes as a highlight, is when you add white to any colour, right? So you can see that changes it slightly. I'm going to just hold this up so you can see. Right, so as you add white, if you want a tone, you add grey. And if you want shade, you use a very, very small amount of black. I'm just going to blend that very, very lightly in there. All right, and that's how you get a tint, a tone and a shade of any given colour. Okay, tint, tone, shade. All right, now that works with any medium, whether you're using colouring pencils, watercolour paint, acrylic paint, pretty much anything. And as you can see, it works with oil pastel. Okay. So I just wanted to show you that, because that's particularly helpful also if you have quite a basic set like I've got here, and you don't have a set that gives you sort of various different tones of red, various different tones of green, and you are, trying to recreate a drawing or a painting that has maybe one colour but various different tones of it. So that is how you can get tones of it, shades of it, and tints of it. Okay. I hope that you found this helpful, and just a little bit of a guide for using oil pastel. And I will see you again soon for my next virtual tutorial.